Hi, guys. Oh my gosh, that was stressful. I couldn't get in to start the live. I don't know why. It was just, I couldn't find the go live section. I had to go into a different section to start it. So, we're here. Hello, everyone. I promise I'm far more expert at baby sleep than I am at all of this, tech stuff. I hope everyone's having a nice day so far. I'm just going to give people the opportunity to jump in. And then we're going to get started and talk all things little one sleep. Alrighty, let me know if you can hear me. Jump on, give me a hello if you can hear me. Awesome. I'd love to hear from you guys. Please keep this interactive. Tell me how old your little ones are. Tell me a fun fact, anything. Awesome. Hi, Chloe. Perfect. All right, just going to wait a few more minutes and then we're going to get started. All right, awesome. Okay, good. Let's get started. Okay, so today we're going to start by talking about baby sleep. Now, we've set this webinar up for little ones from 8 weeks through to 3 years of age, or I think 10 weeks through to 3 years of age. But the main area that we're actually going to focus on is little ones from 12 weeks. So the reason why I set it for 8 to 10 weeks is actually because this is coming up for you guys. I want you to be ahead of the ball. I want you to, I guess, be ready for that period of time and to start to slowly, gently implement things as you feel your little one's heading towards that 12-week mark and when you feel like things are possible. Hey, Jess. Oh, that's awesome. You've got your hands full. Oh my goodness. So what we're going to be doing essentially is looking through the day structuring first of our little ones and then going into night times. And we're going to talk about nighttime waking, cat napping, all of that sort of stuff, right? I'm going to get into the nitty gritty because that's what people are here for. And then obviously your toddler area, toddler bedtimes, things like that. So first things first, it's really important to look at our day structuring, look at how it works best for our little ones to have their day structured to then go into nap transitions and things like that. So when it comes to day naps, your nap 1 and 2 are usually your primary naps of the day. So they're your more important naps. And then the later naps of the day, they usually tend to be your cat naps. If you've got a really young baby, you might find that the last nap of the day for your little one is quite chunky at the moment. So that's their longer one. But typically, and I guess classically, the essentially what we're looking at is that first nap and that second nap being your better, sort of chunkier naps, so an hour or more. Then cat naps I feel like the rest of the day. However, there is this notion out there about capping nap 1 and then making nap 2 huge and that sort of thing. And listen, I'm not against it, so to speak, if it's working well. And I do want to just preface by saying, guys, if what you are doing is working, please don't feel pressure to change anything. But for the most part, most people are here because they're like, something's not working, or I really need some guidance on, certain areas, right? So just keep that in mind. Always following SID-safe guidelines. And there might be something that I recommend for some people that others are like, no, I don't really need to do that, or that's working great for me. So if you are doing the capped first nap, the reason why I don't love it, so to speak, and I want to encourage that first nap to be better or a decent nap, let's go, is because typically that's the one that they will take the easiest. It's the one that they will more naturally extend. And I'm going to be drawing as we go along, guys, because it's the best way that I feel I can explain. And if you're like me, you're going to take it in or learn better this way. But ultimately what happens is that your naps will essentially start to drop off. So you would have lost your 5th nap, eventually you lose your 4th nap of the day, your 3rd nap of the day. So it makes no sense to me to suddenly keep nap 2 and then drop nap 1, right? It doesn't follow the pattern. But on top of that, what we also find is that we then have this process. So for example, in that, so when it comes to the bedtime routine and when it comes to all of this process, that in the lead up to these naps, we actually tend to find that they will take their first nap the easiest and be more naturally prone to extending that one. and or the second, right? So when I talk about nap extensions, it's an hour or more. This whole 2 hour thing, if you're getting that, that's wonderful. But for a lot of people, that doesn't happen for a lot of little ones. And I want you guys to know that's okay if your little one is not doing that extended nap. It's okay if you're not getting a full 2 hours, right, in the middle of the day. That's totally normal also, okay? So what we can focus on is essentially getting the first and second to be a little bit chunky, and then the later naps of the day are those shorter naps. Now, when it comes to nap transitions, it's really important. Like, the reason I love showing this, because I think it's a really good way of seeing things. And I always compare it to, do you guys remember The Price is Right? I'm going to have to stop saying this soon because I feel like I'm getting too old to say this and most people are going to not know The Price is Right. But Larry Edna had this, like, they had this shepherd and his goats, and they used to go off the end of the cliff, right, on this game show thing. I want you guys to think of your naps this way. So initially they might start off with like even 5 naps of the day, right? I don't even have a whiteboard marker, so we're going to have to be working with what we're working with. I hope you guys can see that, okay? But we have these naps that are spanned across the day, right? What happens is that this later nap of the day is going to eventually drop off the cliff, right? And then these 4 naps, we've got to make sure that they span across that day better, right? Eventually you're going to lose your 4th nap. So then you've got to make sure your nap 1, nap 2, and nap 3 are pushed out a bit to span across the day a bit better, right? When I work with clients, so often they'll say the nap transition worked well. Like, yes, we dropped a nap and it worked well. But then after a period of time, they'll be like, but then a few weeks later, something unraveled, right? And what's happening often is that they've either dropped naps too soon. So we do not want to drop our naps too soon, because what happens is one day of one less nap might be okay. 3 days or a week or so of one less nap, you might start to see the gaps appear in the nighttime, or the cracks appear, I should say. And you might just start to say, oh, something's not sitting right. Like, my little one is now starting to fight bedtime or things like that, right? So you really want to check in this lead up when you're looking at this, are we then spanning these naps out okay? Now, super important, when you transition and drop naps, you want to make sure that, like, for example, if your little one was on 4 or 5 naps and bedtime was, let's just say 7:30 p.m. or even 8 o'clock or whatever it might be if they're younger, suddenly when you move to 3 or 4 naps, or let's just say 3 naps, you don't want to suddenly make bedtime at 6:15, right? Because then they're going to have a really hard settle, because guess what? They're going to think that you're trying to get a 4th nap. So what you want to make sure is that if your little ones do drop a nap and you do need to, like, work with an earlier bedtime, it might only come to 6:45 or 7 o'clock, right? Because you've spanned your naps well enough across the day to, yes, bring it forward, because we won't be able to sustain that 7:30, but to not suddenly jump to this, like, okay, now we suddenly got a bedtime falling at 6 p.m., right? Because what I find is that when you have a long stretch to an early bedtime, it's often a disaster. So where you can, when your little one is showing signs that they're dropping a nap, and this is really important because this is going to be applicable all the way up until they fully drop all their naps, which is usually three and a bit, right? Can be from 2.5, but it's usually closer to three and a bit. So what you want to do is make sure, okay, well, in this lead up to bedtime and during this process of dropping naps, have you tried more awake time before you drop that last nap? Have you tried to get the last nap straight in the car, pram, or carrier, or contact nap for that last nap of the day, just to be able to keep it longer? Can we just do a 15-minute nap? Or can we do that last nap? And this could be even just your 1 nap a day that's left on every other day, right? Is your babe just ready for a car nap? When little ones are 2.3 years or 2.5 years, it's very common that they will no longer nap in their sleep space. So they won't nap in their bed or cot, but they will nap in the car each day, or they will nap in the pram. And that's okay. So from that age, we have to accommodate that, because that's what they're developmentally now ready to do, right? If you've got an 18-month-old who won't take their 1 nap a day, that's different. If you find your little one is constantly dropping naps early, has FOMO, makes crazy long awake times, there's going to be a couple of reasons for that. But so often parents are like, oh, they're low sleep needs. Honestly, they're normally not. In my experience, when I'm working with clients, we're actually bringing naps back. The parents are like, oh my gosh, they're actually tired at the, like, more average time now. Like, they're not making these crazy long spans and everything's not a disaster along the way, right? Because when little ones have poor sleep habits, which we're going to get into more so, they're more likely then to have issues with, refusing naps, crazy long awake times, FOMO, their auntie has ADHD or their dad, like maybe that's what they've got, like all these things, right? So it's really important to understand this. We want to span a bit more equally. We want to make sure that when we try and preserve that last nap, when it does drop off, we make sure bedtime doesn't suddenly move too far forwards. And really importantly, we want to try and keep those naps for as long as we can within reason, right? I love a bedtime falling somewhere between 6 and 8 or 6 and 7:45, right? Would normally be my latest. If you've got a 3-month-old, they might still be on 8 or so. But as they get older, by 7:45-ish. I love a morning wake up time between really 5:30 onwards, but 5:45 onwards, anytime up to 7:30. Now, here's the other things. We sometimes might need to cap our naps as well. So I don't love classically just capping a nap. Like I wouldn't just make this suddenly 30 minutes for the sake of it to try and encourage this one. I would be trying to see how this nap goes as a decent nap, how this nap goes as a decent nap, and then having a cat nap there, for example, if you're on 3. From about 9 to 10 months of age, your little one might only do one extended nap a day and one short. So you have one longer, one shorter. It doesn't matter which one that is, but typically I would nurture that first nap of the day, right, to be the longer, because eventually these are all going to come up the hill and drop off the hill, and then your nap one suddenly been falling at 10:30, and that's the one that now moves to 11 o'clock more classically, right? So when it comes to looking at structuring, what you might want to do is if you've got a 7-month-old, right, and you're like, oh, I'm stuck. I can't fit in the third nap anymore, or they might be 8 months old. I can't fit in the third nap, so to speak, but when I do 2 naps, it's a total disaster. That tells me that they might not be ready for that transition yet. When I say we want to keep the naps, more naps the longer, because if you can buy your little one even 2 weeks of age, the transitions can often be so much more smoother. So if you've got an 8-month-old, when they're 8.5 months, or even 4 weeks later, 9 months, when you transition them to 2 naps and they're then on 3 or so hours awake time, they will cope so much better than if you just tried to jump too soon. So when you can buy yourself weeks, and what I mean by that is that if your nap one, for example, was an hour and 50 minutes, let's just say, you might even consider, okay, should we just do an hour and a half there, make second nap only 45 minutes so we can still fit in a 30-minute or 15-minute kip in the afternoon? Or my babe's waking at 7. Can we make them at 6:30 so we can still fit in the 3 naps, because that's what's working better and that's what's going to buy us a little bit of age. Now, if your baby's pushed everywhere, like they're waking at 5:30, they're not going to bed till 8, like don't feel like you've got to keep squeezing the third nap in. There comes a point that it only makes sense to transition to the lesser naps, right? But it's really important not to rush it. And it's really important to note that you might have to do just a little bit of like manipulating with like morning wake time or shortening one of those naps to be able to fit in that extra nap for just that little bit longer until you think now they're ready. Like now I feel like it's pushing bedtime way too late. They're just not taking it. It's been, such a hassle. They're a little bit older now. Now we'll drop that nap, right? So keeping a really close eye on that really matters when it comes to their sleep. So that's an overview of naps. Now you would use this also for your 18-month-old when they're ready to drop. Anywhere between 14 to 19 months, they usually drop from 2 naps to 1, right? There will be days where you still do the 2 naps. There will be days where the 1 nap, tends to be a bit shorter, because unfortunately what happens is when your little ones move to 1 nap a day, they're really tired to begin with. Even if they're ready, they're really tired. And it's an adjustment. It takes time for them to adjust to 1 or no nap. And so what you need to consider is that they might actually only sleep for an hour, or wake up crying after 30 minutes because they're so tired. So if that's the case, you can, if you're on 1 nap a day and struggling, you can do a little 15-minute nap in the morning at around 8:30, let's just say. And then you could have your lunchtime nap and see if they cope better with that lunchtime nap a little bit, like say 12:30, and see if they'll then have a good lunchtime nap, because this is just taking the edge off. If this nap goes for 30 minutes, you've often ruined this chance, right? So just keeping in mind it needs to be short, but you can do things like that. But sometimes also it might be that there's days where you do the 2 naps, days where you do the 1. So you do a little bit of dicing between the 2 naps to 1, or between 1 to no nap, or having a bit of downtime here and there, because it really, really helps. So this leads me into my next sort of area, which is what I want to talk about next, is more coming into this idea of sleep pressure and why our little ones refuse sleep. And that when we look at making any changes to sleep, we really want to understand this notion of sleep pressure, right? So I just had a client who came to me and they were like, Tara, my baby, we have tried everything. We've worked with other consultants. We've done all the things, right? That baby is now taking incredible naps, sleeping beautifully through the night, settling so beautifully, right? And they had literally the mums come to me every day and they're like, you don't understand my babe. Like, you don't understand the position that I'm in. I feel like it's impossible. I feel like we've tried everything. And honestly, there's so much around this, even these times, understanding this, there's so much around the lead ups to bedtime, around what pattern program we're putting in place before you even come to a method, right? A method is just one piece of it. So the next gap that we want to fill in when we're looking at sleep changes, and this is really important for toddlers too. So if you're here for toddler sleep, this is like a game changer. And to be honest, there's a lot of people on this call webinar who have 7 and 5-year-olds. And I want you guys to always remember me talking about sleep pressure, because as our little ones get older, you're going to have to battle homework, screen time, all of that, right? I want us to look at, now there's this notion of they'll sleep when they're tired, right? Just let them run themselves into the ground and they'll sleep. No, even if they do fall asleep, eventually they're going to wake soon after, have really poor quality sleep, because then you've got your adrenals on board. What we want to do to facilitate really good sleep settles and patterns for our little ones is be really aware of awake times, how long their awake time is on average, let's just say. So let's just say we've got a 6-month-old who's on 2 and a bit hours awake time, just as an example, right? You could have a 4-month-old who's on a little bit less. This is their awake time in general, right? I'm just going to move this way a tiny bit more. Hopefully everyone can see. Well, so when we think about the next point is that these are our awake times. This is how we're doing the nap transitions. Awake times in general, I want us to look at pairing two things. So we want to pair observation, right? So we're keeping an eye on them, but we're not looking for these big signs of they're so irritable, they're beyond it, right? You just know that they're beyond that. What we're doing is pairing and looking for a bit of a calm before the storm. Is there that opportunity in the lead up to bedtime where we just notice that they're losing interest, they're not engaging, they don't want to play with their toys, they seem a bit if they're a toddler, they're just sort of hanging around a bit lost, that sort of thing, right? That's sort of where we want to look for, but we want to pair that with an average time. So the average awake time for their age, because most babes do track. Even when parents say to me, I don't have a structure, I don't really know. A lot of babes are actually, when we work it out, they're actually still having a similar amount of awake time or a similar amount of naps in that in their day than the other babes their age, but they're hiding it. So if you've got a younger babe, a lot of people come to me. The main reason for newborns, people come to me is they're literally on the phone. They're upset. They're like, Tara, my baby is awake for 5 hours straight. They just won't sleep. They just won't go down, right? Now, this is where this part comes in. Sleep pressure. If you've followed me for a while, you probably know about this, but it's really important because you cannot make changes to sleep without paying attention to this. And this is where a lot of sleep schools go wrong. You could, for example, be off to Nagala for a sleep stay. On the way there, your babe's been drowsy in the car. You fed them, they've dozed on their feed. Then you go and put them into this strange environment to go to sleep, and they haven't even checked, what happened in their awake time? So instead of getting our babes overtired, we want to make sure our 6-month-old has the right awake time. We're going to say around 2 hours 15 to pretend, right? But in that awake time, they've had the opportunity to expend and build up sleep pressure ready for sleep. If you have a feed, play, sleep, which is the pattern that I do love because it works really well with moving forward. If you're in a 3-hourly feed structure, as your babe gets older, it's going to all clash, right? Not only that, there's going to be a lot of times where the feeds then fall closer to sleep. And I'm going to explain why that can cause, not always, but can cause issues with sleep, right? So instead, what I love doing is letting our babe wake up for a little bit. So they have 10 minutes awake time. Then we offer them a feed, right? Let's just say they're 6 months old. They've maybe had a good 10 minutes of feeding. Then we've got play, energy out, and bang, I'm ready for sleep at 2 hours 15, right? What happens with a lot of newborns, which is natural and normal, and the reason why they tend to seem to fight sleep is because they've been drowsy here, They might have another little top up here on and off the breast. Now, this is the same for 8-month-olds, 2-year-olds who come, they're tired, they come have a little suck on the breast, or they come chill and watch like TV for 10 minutes, they get their second wind. This is classic for toddler bedtimes. Parents think, yeah, I'll give them some screen time while we're cooking dinner. They're down, watching screens, melatonin's being taken out of their brain, like being not produced, like instead we're producing the opposite hormones, which keep them awake. They're also rest, reboot, bang. Then we're like, it's bedtime, and they're like, I am ready to go. So we must pay attention no matter what age, even for your 7-year-olds, even for your 5-year-olds, for your 3-month-olds, what is happening in their awake time that is ruining or taking away, minimizing their appetite for sleep. So think of this as like entrees before their main of sleep, right? They're having downtime here on the feed. They're having downtime here. We have parents who come to us because their little one won't feed except for right before sleep, right? Then they won't settle, or they'll only settle because they've fed to sleep, right? But having a look at this now, so if you've got a little one who will only feed to sleep, can you move it away a little bit? So you've still got like 10 minutes. Can you keep them a bit more engaged on this feed before bedtime? To start to like, if they can still get drowsy initially, but can we start to do a little bit more interaction? So we're reducing how much they're using that feed to get to sleep. And I will explain that a bit more. We're going to go into that part more. But this is really important. Or a lot of parents say to me, my baby's like a really slow feeder or needs multiple feeds because they're a distracted feeder. But guess what? The more feeds you offer, the more distracted you have as a baby who's going to feed distracted, right? Because the Milky Bar is always open. The more you feed all night, feed. Guess who doesn't care about feeding so much during the day? Guess who's now a distracted feeder, who's a snack feeder, or who spends half an hour of this precious time where they're supposed to be building up sleep pressure, they instead are spending half an hour getting all zoned out, right, on that feed, nice and chill, all of that, having an excessively long feed for their age. This is different for newborns, right? It's normal, natural, all the things. But you have to pay attention to this. So I would be more inclined to offer, if they don't have the best feed, offer one more time, and after that, move on to play. The next most important part is making sure that when they are feeding, they're engaged and awake, right? Unless you're feeding to sleep, we can talk about that soon. But otherwise, they're really engaged, really awake in the lead up to bedtime. Then they're ready to then have that sleep when it's due, right? Especially if you're going to make any changes to sleep. So any changes to sleep we'd make from the beginning of the night time. So that day, I would do what you would normally do to get your little one to sleep. This is toddlers too, right? If they usually have a nap on your whatever it is, do that. But then after the last nap of the day, we'd be on Tara's time. Let's make this change after that last nap of the day. Have this really solid lead up. Now, the time that this changes is I do feed, play, sleep throughout the day, but the one before bed, I do 45 minutes out from bedtime. You could still do a feed on waking if you feel your babe needs 2 feeds, especially if they're on 3 hours awake time or more. But if they're only on an hour and a half awake time, when they first get up, I then do your bath if you're going to bath or play, whatever you're going to do then I'd have, I like playtime. Then I'd have a feed 45 minutes out from bed, and then you've only got a little bit more play, say half an hour, and then it's bedtime, right? So I'd move it. So you're not feed, play, sleep before bed. The one before bed, you're still giving them a feed within sort of 40 minutes of bedtime, right? So we want to make sure that they've had that. Now, a lot of people actually spend this last period of awake time before bedtime offering lots of feeds, lengthy feeds, keep doing the reofferings because they want to try and fill them up, thinking that that's going to be the better sleep, when so often, and especially in my experience, by the time that parents come to me, it is the rarest thing that actual stuffing them full is what then leads to better sleep. In fact, all of these reofferings are what can be causing the broken sleep or the sleep issues or the settling issues, because they're not only resting, rebooting, but they're associating that feeds fall close to sleep, right? So that's really important. Now, I'm going to see if I have enough stuff on here. I probably don't. That's fine. We're just going to leave that for now. We'll sort that out later. So when we talk about the next part, that's pretty much my drawing done for today. So when we talk about toddlers or babies' bedtimes, we want to make sure that if we're making change, we're making it from the beginning of the night. We want to look at their sleep pressure in the lead up to bedtime. No screens, preferably within 3 hours of bedtime. Not only will that support their sleep at the beginning of the night, it will support their sleep throughout the night dramatically. I really can't stress that enough, guys. So we're going to make sure in that lead up to bedtime, they've built up that sleep pressure, they play, they've expended that energy. And most of all, especially for our toddlers as well, we've had connection time, right? Now, so often for our toddlers, bless them and bless the parents who are raising toddlers, especially in this day and age when we also are trying to do all the rest of God's work with work and house and everything else, right? Our little ones might be in daycare or they've had their kindy day or, yeah, perhaps they've been at home with us. But what we really want to do is find some connection time in the lead up to bedtime. I am so maternal and warm and loving, and all I want is the best for children. Like I will never be able to, unless you, as you know me, as you get to know me, if you're newer to our page, you will realize that children, it is my legacy. It is like my life's work, my purpose to make homes better. That is the simplest way to put it. And I have found a vehicle of being able to do that through being able to talk about sleep, changes, sleep patterns, toddler sleep, all of that. But guys, like that is one pinch of it, because when you have better sleep, there's better relationships, better mental health outcomes, better relational outcomes between parents, better mood, better development, better physicality, like all the things, right, that are impacted by sleep deprivation. But also what we can do in this time is say, right, but I also really want to focus on how can we build better connection and how can we bring our children back, if they are in care all day or if they are with their friends all day, back into the home and back to us as their primary caregivers and their leaders. And so what I want you guys to think about in your lead up to bedtime with your baby or toddlers is that connection time. It's outdoor time. It's bringing, it's having that time to immerse yourself in your babe, make eye contact, phones away, forget the cleaning until after they're in bed, especially once they're sleeping better. You'll have plenty of time to do all the things that need to be done. But really finding those opportunities instead of the TV time and all the downtime, it is that we have this opportunity to connect, to be a part of that family, to keep a family tradition, be that, having dinner together, playtime together in the lounge room, but also making sure that in that lead up, they're building up that pressure for sleep. If you have a toddler who's having 15 books, for example, they might be really losing that sleep pressure. So loss of sleep pressure doesn't have to just be on feeds. It could be on car trips. You guys have all been in that position, right? You're like, yeah, I'll get them home for their nap. They've kind of chilled out in the car the whole time, get them home. They almost get this second wind and you're like, right now, go to bed. And they're just like, no, and they refuse it. Or they've slept for 2 minutes. You're like, it was 2 minutes, go back to bed, but in their mind, they don't know how long they've slept for, and that sleep pressure's gone, right? So sleep pressure can be lost in different ways, but we want to make sure that in that time, we're then also really making sure that they're building up, that pressure for sleep. Yeah, so if your little one, for example, just like you think they're tired before they're due. So, for example, if you've got a little one on 3 hours awake time and they start showing signs at 2 hours 45, it's okay that they can still be tired, like they can still show tired signs. We're not trying to stop that. It's more that then we either put them to bed early if you think that will work, and you can try that and see how it goes. If whenever I jump to mark, it's very easy to tell. Whenever I jump the mark and think that they're due to go down because they're showing some signs, your best bet is just change up what they're doing. Give them a different thing to play with. Doesn't mean you have to be in their face the whole time, like keeping them wide awake. It's not about that. It's more about those really distinguished opportunities where they lose sleep pressure. So feeding, car trips, screen time. If they're just playing around though, it's not that you have to be there making sure they're extra buzz, It's more, it's those real downtime opportunities. But what I would do is that, especially if your little one seems to almost trick you with tired signs, change up what they're doing, swap rooms, do a different toy, water play, outdoor play, whatever you can do at that moment will usually help. And then when it's time, then off to bed from there. But again, it doesn't mean they can't show the signs. It doesn't mean they have to be a buzz the whole awake time. Not at all. They're going to have moments in their awake times where they'll be a bit oh, as they get older, they might even say, I'm tired. You try and put them down. It's a joke. They're not there, because our babes still need normally some form of that average awake time. So yeah, that's what I would recommend when it comes to that side of things. So when we're looking at making any so Bobby, when they're at daycare all day, this is my favorite thing to change in parents' lives whose little are in daycare all day. This never comes with making you feel guilty. I'm going to first start by saying that, right? But our little ones were designed to be with us really a lot, a lot more than what they are these days, right? And so I want your primary focus on nights where you make dinner, bulk it so you don't have to make it for the next night. Bulk make something on a Sunday, whatever you can do, have that dinner time, the cooking time, but put them in a stand and have them on the other side playing Play-Doh at the dining at the bench while you're making the dinner. Like just trying to find opportunities to reconnect, it's called recollect your child, right? There's actually the most profound book I've ever read, and I swear I will ever read in my life, and it's called Hold On to Your Kids. And it's basically that now our children are so peer raised because they're in daycares from young. It is what it is. But what's happening is because those daycares and things like that are essentially now the peers are with our children the more than we are, so they become peer orientated. So it's really important after daycare and school, especially as they're getting older, that we still preserve Sundays, we still preserve dinner times, we still have time after school to come home and be with them and play with them. And it's called collecting our kids back to us as their primary. Because the thing is that when children are peer raised, they're peer respectful, they're not parent respectful. So as they start to get older, if they are so focused on peers as their primary attachment, they won't care. This is why so many kids are like not having that respect, not listening to their parents, because their parent isn't their primary attachment anymore, right? So our whole job is how can we be primary attached, not in an unhealthy way, so we still have boundaries. That doesn't mean we don't make them cry. In fact, it's the opposite. Like we are holding boundaries, right? But we're connecting. We're reconnecting with our kids. Every time they come back, we're having playtime before dinner, playtime while we're making dinner, or after dinner, we've got saturated play. And even if it's 15 to 20 minutes, it's phones away. Nothing else matters. You're rolling, tumbling with them, looking them in the eyes, active listening with them, and tell me what happened with that. And this and that, get interested in their toys. Like you are literally bringing them back to home. That is like, if you do anything with your family, you must do that. You must recollect and reconnect with your kids after school time as they get older, and especially when they're in teenage years, even when they won't want to at times. Kills me. So that is really important. So then we've had this connection time. We've had this time. They've built up sleep pressure in the car. And the other thing is, guys, if they fall asleep in the car, no worries. Our programs are not where you don't have any flexibility, right? I have 3 kids. I had a baby 6 years after my second. So they were doing sports, like things, all the things, school. So I get it. It's so if your little one is in the car, they're either wide awake until you get home, then have a little play, then to bed, or they can fall asleep in the car, but then you let them have the sleep, or you transfer them if they transfer well. So it's that gray area you don't want, where they've been drowsy and then you try and get them to learn, do that self-settle. That's where it gets messy. So wide awake in the car, that's where you can essentially be doing, just different things to try and keep them awake, songs, all of that sort of thing in the car, different toys that they're not always having. Kitchen utensils, great, tongs, just really random things that they're not used to having. The box for the alfoil, make sure it's not sharp, but then the the roll, and they can clang that, just not alfoil, the obviously safely when it's empty. You guys know what I mean, but just random things that you're like, oh, they don't usually have this inside. So in the car, they think it's pretty cool. A jar that's full of shells for them to look at, just really random things, not their normal toys, can keep them really engaged in the car. So when we make change after the last nap of the day, that's when we're going into that bedtime routine. That's when we're like, right, now we're going to look at this process of how we're going to teach our little ones to settle and self-settle off to sleep. When it is toddlers, it is really important. And this comes from 18 months onwards. So even if you're here for a 9-month-old and you're thinking, oh, she's talking about toddlers right now, I'll switch off, you will be there in the blink of an eye. It's so soon. So hold your boundaries kind and firm, right? We've collected our kids. We've reconnected with our kids. We're spending time with them, because I tell you what, when connection is high, resistance is low. When connection is high, resistance is low. When connection is not high, resistance is really high, right? So we have to connect to direct and also guide. Think of it as guiding our little ones through that bedtime routine as a sturdy leader. We're the leaders. We're the ones that are saying we're doing this and this. None of this baby-led forever stuff. It doesn't work long term, because it puts the responsibility of adult onto a toddler, right? It's nice to have baby-led, feeds when they're newborns and things like that. But our babies need guidance. They love guidance. They love that security that comes from, patterns and essentially having boundaries as they're getting older and things like that, right? So, and also it's our job to protect things that are really important for our little ones. So be that what they're eating, their bedtimes, safety, boundaries, all of that, right? Screen time, all the things. So we really want to make sure that in that lead up to bedtime, they've had that playtime. Now for babies, then you're looking at what is the most common cause of a baby waking frequently or having short naps, right? The most common cause is that little ones will have, for example, I've really screwed myself here, guys. Sorry. Let's just say our little ones, I'm going to do it right here. Hopefully everyone can see that. Right. They're in their surface of sleep. From 4 months, which is the regression, which is when everyone's going to tell you that your little one's starting teething, which most of the time, 9 times out of 10, it's not teething, right? Some people say, a lot of my clients say, my baby's been teething from 3 months old and they've got their first tooth that's 9 months old, Now, what happens is your babe starts to mouth everything. Everything starts to go in their mouth because they can now coordinate hands to mouth. In order to protect them during this time, it is very important that they start producing more saliva. That's what helps to help with bacteria, right? Also preparing for digestion, and their salivary glands kick in. So now you've got a baby who can coordinate hand into mouth. The reason they can do that is so that they can learn about all the sensory things, all the things they're experiencing through their mouth. It's our version of hands. It's how they feel, learn, textures, all the things, right? They start putting their hand in their mouth. They start putting everything in their mouth. They start drooling more. Then we hit this 4-month regression. I can see why everyone thinks it's teething. However, it's normally not. And it's also a really blimmin' long process to get in the blame game for, right? So many people feel stuck in this teething loop and they're convinced that that's what's doing it. It's just not. It's so rare. And honestly, dentists will say the only time that a babe should be really irritable from teething is as the tooth essentially is cut, you can see the top of that tooth in the split the gum, and it's now you can see the slit of the tooth, because that might cause a little bit of inflammation, right? This ongoing months and months of trying Nurofen, Panadol, teething, sometimes getting better sleep, things like that, you do not need to be stuck in that cycle. At 4 months, your little one's sleep cycles become more defined. So before that, they may have had a big stretch of sleep for 3 hours here and there or whatever else, right? If you've had unsettled newborns, you may not have got that. I've been there with the newborns, trust me. 4 months old, your little ones become more defined. And so they come out of a sleep cycle they come out of, in between these sleep cycles. They come to a more uncertain point. This is actually a progressive thing, right? Because really in nature, the whole idea is that we are progressing our young. There's this thing that says humans are the only species that try and regress their young, right? Don't push for that progression, right? And there's a really healthy balance there. Trust me, I would love to keep all my little ones little, but it's just not the case. But we want to make sure that, so this is so that they're becoming an alert to check that everything is as it was between sleep cycles. So we all do this as adults. They are doing it now, coming into that 4-month period as a safety mechanism, right? To check everything is as it was as they prepare to be further away from the pouch, further away from mum, so to speak. Obviously not far away, but you know what I mean. Now, the most common reason for catnapping and frequent waking, this is for toddlers as well, is because something was there at the beginning of the night that is now no longer there during the night, or they lack the ability when they're now awakened to be able to get back to sleep. Now, this could be parents sitting on the bed. It could be feeding a baby to sleep. It could be, and this is 3 months and above, it could be rocking your baby to sleep. It could be it can be a number of things that is essentially that your little one is using to get to sleep, right? That is then becoming their cue for sleep, because babies are born to pick up patterns and associations. It is what keeps us safe, and it is what our brain likes to do. The reason why we hate change and babies hate change is because change doesn't feel safe. Now, making change to sleep is not wrong, right? There is not a loss of attachment. You don't have to worry about well, if they cry, does that mean it goes against all my maternal instincts? It is meant to feel uncomfortable when you make change. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's new. 2 things can be true. Yes, it feels uncomfortable when we make change to sleep. And when I work with clients, be that one-on-one or in our online program, everything that I am doing is to reduce any upset, is to set your baby up to be able to get a hold of a new pattern. And it is to be a sustainable change. So you're not in this constant loop of well, we feel like we get a few nights and then something goes off. And I've worked with this consultant that lasted a month and then I had to do this. No. We're changing patterns through all of this stuff and understanding that then allows for this to be much better. People will say to you, babies are meant to awaken. Yes, they are. Not to cry every 2 hours for you to come in exhausted and do X, Y, and Z to get them back to sleep. That is learned patterns. If a baby sleeps well from the get-go, does that mean they don't developmentally have, like, are they developmentally, like, not good? You know what I mean? If they're getting good sleep? No. Why is it some babies can sleep through from 4 months? Why is it some babies don't sleep through till 6 years, right? It comes down to usually the hygiene around what they are associating with sleep, how we manage their sleep, and there's other factors, obviously. These are your prominent ones, right? It really comes down to these things. So yes, they're meant to awaken to check everything is as it was and drift back off, drift back off, drift back off until they need a feed, right? Now, if your little one is 3 to 5 months, you might be doing 1 to 2 night feeds. If your little one is 5 months and above, typically, obviously, this isn't medical advice, but typically that'd be, the 1 feed a night would be suffice at that point, right? So in this second half of the night, for example, in the second half of the night is where you'd want to do that feed. If they're waking, and the first stretch of sleep can often be the better stretch, right? So people say, no, it must be teeth because my baby can do long stretches at times. Often that's because the first stretch of the first 4 hours is their deepest sleep. So they're almost accidentally transitioning because they're in a deeper sleep, right? Which is why I don't like a dream feed classically, because you're pulling them out of deep sleep to give them something that they don't need. They need rest and digest, right? So if you've got a colicky baby, if you've got a windy baby, making changes to this is phenomenal when it comes to them being able to rest and digest, being able to get a good idea of, like, what is the actual symptoms here? Is it that my baby can't lay down because of reflux, or is it that they need to be held or fed to sleep because of this? Right? I can't tell you how many lives we transform from people who are like literally still thinking their 12-month-old has reflux and can't be laid flat, when really it came down to they won't go down without X, Y, and Z. And as soon as they do try and lay them down flat and they're awake, they cry, and parents are thinking it must be the milk coming back up, when so often it's not. It's related to this. And so your toddler, you sitting on the edge of the bed, they come through the night, you're not there anymore. You put them to sleep by reading 10 books in their bed. They're starting to get nice and drowsy with you there. Suddenly they wake up in the night, you're not there anymore. It can be the smallest things that they're holding on to, or it could just be that maybe they are self-settling. Often they might not be, but maybe they are, but they keep getting a feed right before sleep, and that keeps queuing. Okay, 1 + 1 =. If I need to get back to sleep, I need the feed. Is there a dummy in at the beginning of the night? Now the dummy's out. Now we're awake. We have to wake up, try and find the dummy. If not, when we can find it, try and use it. Now we're awake. We're going to call out for mum to come in and do a feed, or to come in and do a pat back to sleep, or whatever else, right? It is when your little ones have the ability to be awake and fall off to sleep that transforms their sleep, because not only then is nothing changing between sleep cycles, but when they do wake up, so even if you feel like you've got this beginning of the night like managed, but if they don't know how to do the resettles during the night, or if the resettles aren't managed effectively, that is when you'll keep getting these constant wakings, right? So with your toddler, you could be like, okay, we'll come into my bed, sleep the night there, or I'll come back into your bed and sit until you fall back asleep again. They come out of the next cycle, and you can see that pattern comes along. The change process, when that feels uncomfortable, no matter what age, there is a way to do it effectively, which is this sleep pressure. It's having a method that doesn't confuse them. It is making sure that you look at, okay, well, can we do some weaning first? Like, is there things that we can reduce? I'm co-sleeping, I'm rocking, I'm using a dummy. Can we do a rock and dummy and put them in their cot for a period of time? Can we do a rock but no dummy if the dummy's problematic, and then put them down after the rock? Can we then lessen that to ultimately get to the idea of having that ability to have a feed 45 minutes before bed, playtime, then into bed and go to sleep? Now, if your little one won't feed well unless they're in the sleep space, you can try moving it forward just a tiny bit for a little bit of time. You could try moving it forward by 5 months, by 40 minutes, keeping them awake. If they don't have a full feed, you can try offering one more time. If they're still not feeding well, you move on to play and then move on to that initial settle. Because if you keep reoffering right till bedtime, you're never going to get the change, right? And if you feel like you don't have the confidence because you're like, but what if they haven't had enough milk? And like, I get it. It's like so stressful because you're like, I just want them to have a good feed because otherwise the night's going to be even worse. That's when you might have to come and work with us to have our confidence, to have it the right way, where okay, this is what we're doing at each point. This is how I want you to manage this. So when you then are teaching your babe to go down in their sleep space awake and to go back to sleep, right? That's when we then want to look at, okay, what is it that they're relying on? Now, Luciana, I'm going to be really frank with you. I understand the eczema piece. I work with loads, countless of eczema babes. I used to be a pediatric nurse, so I get it. But this hourly waking, if it's every night, I don't believe that that'll be eczema that's doing that for your little one, unless it's really poorly managed. Like unless there's no, management, right? Like around that eczema and it's like rife, right? But so often I actually find that not only can we then get them to sleep better, but it settles so much because eczema is so linked to the overall well-being of a babe, right? And so getting that good sleep is transformative, right? I'm not saying it gets rid of eczema, I'm not saying it gets rid of reflux, but it really does make a really big difference for these babes. And it also is so often then parents are like, I swear to God, Tara, like I honestly believe that it was their eczema waking them every hour. Whereas normally, even if they're self-settling at the start of the night, Luciana, does your little one use a dummy in the slightest? Does your little one have a dummy around at all? Be totally transparent with me. And what does your babe use to get back to sleep? If you can quickly type that in. Yeah. So what would your little one be looking for to get back to sleep? Is it patting, rocking, feeding? What is it? Okay, I'm going to keep talking while that one comes through. So when we look at this, how can we teach our little ones essentially to be able to be awake in their sleep space and get back off to sleep, right? And so when we can do that, that makes a big difference. When you make changes, a lot of people say, but how do we do that? How do we do that next step? That's when you want to look at which methods are going to be more effective. Like I said, you can start with that weaning sort of process of doing like a little bit less of this, not if they're having a really hard time, but it's really good to be able to see like, what can we sort of minimize without causing upset to begin with as really slow processes? And then you'd look at your methods. How are we going to make this change? Is that an in the room method where we're weaning away? Is that an in and out method where we're still very responsive to our babes? Like there's lots of different ways, but what I would be paying attention to is what is going to get them from the point of A to B, which is awake and they are doing that sleep part. And then how can we re-implement that during the night time? Are we making it worse? Pick up, put down methods can be very frustrating. Just returning your toddler 26 times a night doesn't always, work. We need to have a boundary there. I'm happy to be here. You need to lay quietly. If you keep doing X, Y, and Z, I'm stepping out of the room, right? Really important that toddlers feel that we're large and in charge, that their leader is leading that resettle. If they're mucking around in there, I'm stepping out for a moment. I'm not here for you to muck around. No pressure on the word sleep ever. It's laying quietly, rest your body. It's Nana's time, things like that, right? But the reason why things get frustrating is because our boundaries, we've crossed them ourselves. Our boundaries, we've not regarded our own boundaries. When I'm getting frustrated with the kids, it's because I know that I haven't held a firm enough boundary and I'm in the end almost in that like I'm in the back of the bus and somebody else is running the bus, right? And it's frustrating and it's exhausting and they're leading the show and I'm trying to negotiate and there's too much dialogue. If I'm like, no, I've said no to this, we're not having this, I know that you want it, and then I'm allowing my toddler to have their big feelings without the need to negotiate, dialogue, all the things, just saying, I know that you want that, and here's why we're not doing that. I don't just say like, I've just said no. I will literally be like, we've already had ice cream last night. We're not having ice cream every night, whatever it might be, right? We've done 2 books. We're moving on now. Have a stamp chart with your toddlers. Brush their teeth, they get to stamp it, sticker it, whatever, in the lead up to bedtime. It gives them a sense of autonomy, right? Whilst you're still navigating that lead up to bedtime. So they're still in control in one respect, but really when they're asking for more milk or more water or whatever it is, look, you've stamped it off already, sweetie. We've already had our water, because that's them trying to take control. And here's the thing, toddlers will try and take more control when they feel like their big person is not leading. So the next time you feel bad for holding a boundary, has to be fair and kind. I want you to remember that boundary is so freaking important for your baby. It is vital for your little ones, right? In the lead up. When you feel bad, if your little one's having a tricky time when you're trying to make changes to sleep, I want you to know your job is to do it the right way, to have a really solid plan, to have something that's going to really work effectively and set them up in the right way. And then next to that, your job is to support them while they have that change process, because there is usually upset during that change process. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It means it's new. And this is the first time, right, when you can see that something's not working, that it feels really hard to change it, because you know that there's going to be that stage of discomfort and unease, right? But that is the beginning of parenthood, because there will be so many things that you'll go, you know what, I've really let this screen time slide. Now, if I'm going to pull it back, they're going to have a really hard time with it. That is your job. I've seen that I've been really loose on who they're hanging out with as they get older. I'm sorry, sweetie, enough's enough. You are not, like, we're not doing this or that, or you're not going on Friday night. It's the beginning. It is the beginning of recognizing something is not working for us as a family. And my job as your big leader is to make a change, even when it feels uncomfortable. My relationship with your dad or mom or this partnership is falling apart because sleep deprivation is ruining who I am. I don't know myself. This experience of early parenthood is nothing that I imagined it to be because of sleep deprivation. I need to step in and make a change now. That is what you're doing. And that doesn't change your attachment. And yes, your babes might have a tricky time, but that is when you go, okay, I'm going to do a program. I'm going to do this effectively. I'm going to know that it's only going to be a few days of this change process, because guess what? Your little one then learns a new familiar, but one that supports sleep, right, in the lead up to bedtime. And that is transformative, because then they have not only better sleep habits, but they become more familiar with their new thing again, right? So when you first make change, the brain is like, this feels wrong, don't do it. It's no different to when you leave a bad relationship, a bad job, a bad boss. You know, we do patterns every day that are bad for us, like, because it feels familiar, it feels better than making the change, right? But if you do it in the right way, I'm going to allow my baby to learn to be awake and go to sleep. I've made sure they've kept that sleep pressure. They haven't been drowsy on their feed before bed. I've done some weaning beforehand. I'm still going to be supportive of them through that process, but I'm going to do it in a way that's really effective. So, Luciana, there will normally be something that your baby's now relying on. And it might be that your little one self-settles at the night, but do you get them drowsy first during the nighttime? Is it that your babe's looking for that pick up and cuddle? You know, because if you're picking up and cuddling, that won't fix the eczema, if that makes sense. So then they fall asleep again, then we put them down again, but then an hour later, oh, I'm awake, you know, come pick me up, cuddle me. Like, normally there is a pattern. There is a pattern. And as long as the eczema, it still really matters, as long as that's, you know, well enough managed, they can still sleep really, really beautifully. So they don't need to wake up and go to bed at the same time. There can be a variance, absolutely. I would say with bedtime, like, if I wouldn't, like when we looked at earlier, that huge jump. So be mindful that they probably will become quite programmed to a particular time of bed. So if you suddenly try and change that variable too much, that might, you know, upset things. But otherwise, having a bit of a variable, they don't have to have set times during the day until they're a bit older and on the 2 naps, things like that, right? So it's really, really important. So what I want to do is essentially look at, you know, that lead up, that nighttime. Now, this is how you resolve catnapping. Catnapping essentially is that they've come out of a sleep cycle, something's changed, something's gone, something's missing, or your baby lacks the ability to drift back into the next sleep cycle. When your little ones fall asleep without the use of external measures, if they've got a dummy, I'm not against dummies, I'm not against feeding to sleep. But if your little one is then waking frequently, catnapping, not being able to settle without those things, that's when you have to look. Nothing is inherently bad around those things until it's not working, until you get real about what is actually impacting this sleep side of things. And everyone negotiates a dummy. They're like, oh, they're not really using it, or, oh, I don't think it's that. But so often it plays a part, right? Because they're falling asleep with it. Even if they keep it in, they're now in lighter surface sleep because they have to suck it and keep it in. So they're not getting into that real you know, like laid back position. So then they come awake, they either now have to wake up to find their dummy, find their whatever it is, their bottle, their water bottle, whatever it is. Now they can't get back to sleep. It's gone. That ability to then drift rhythmically between those cat naps is what we're looking at. So catnapping usually comes down to the right awake time. If your baby's waking after 30 minutes crying really hard, try a little less awake time. If they're waking after 45 minutes and they're okay on and off or anything like that, try a little bit more, right? So looking at how they wake up can matter for cat naps, but mainly looking at what they're using to fall asleep and then giving them an opportunity to see if they'll go back to sleep, but not doing it in a way, right? So the opportunity to go back to sleep, but not doing it a way where you're stuck in the room for an hour trying to get them back to sleep. It's not worth it. You might give them 10 or 15 minutes. And if they're not going back off to sleep, then up you get and you work on that awake time, right? And you work on that self-settling piece. Sleep refusal will so often come down to sleep pressure, the right awake time, and then what they're using to get to sleep. All of these three things are like wildly big when it comes to sleep for toddlers, for babies, for children in general, right? Because they're essentially those external things are coming into play. So dragging out bedtime. Use your stamp chart, stamp it off in the lead up. The next thing is your little one feels there's a power struggle. They feel like they're running the show too much because your boundaries are maybe gray. There's maybe a bit of grayness, right? Here's the thing. I want you to get really, really unafraid of your child's big feelings. You can be impacted by them because even when Charlie has a tantrum now, I'm like, ooh, right? But I'm not afraid of him having that moment. And the sooner that they realize that I'm okay with your big feelings, they don't scare me, they don't overwhelm me. If to fake it, to make it, they don't, I will sit on the bus with you and these big feelings, basically, the sooner that your little one will have a less hard time with them and get through them much easier. So often the reason why the big tantrums happen is because it's gray area. So they're so used to us giving in and ending up doing X, Y, and Z. So their tantrums get bigger and bigger to get it quicker because they know they're going to get it in the end. It can be that the boundary you don't feel solid enough in holding that boundary. So you're worried about them, their big feelings, you're scared of them, you feel overwhelmed by them. So you have to go into regulating yourself during that time. The other thing is that making sure that when they're having those big feelings, we're not getting into the dialogue too much. Don't get into it with them. Here's the boundary. I know that you want this, and here's why we're not having this. But then you don't spend the next 20 minutes trying to negotiate them out of it, talk them out of it, whatever. Let them get all their big feelings out. You don't have to punish them. Do not look at them with shame or like what is wrong with you in that time. It impacts them. You want to be like, I know that this feels really big and hard. And I know that you've got these big feelings about this, and I'm okay with it equally, right? The sooner that you do that, the better. And then there might be times where you literally have to pick your toddler up and be like, we're going into the room now. Enough's enough, right? And you do the boundary, right? I've said, no more of this. I've had that connection time. So Jane, we've got to make sure we're connecting. Your lead ups to bedtime, guys, I can't stress this enough, matter not to be ritualistic, right? You don't have to do everything at the exact same time. What matters most is that you've connected with your toddler or little one in the lead up to bedtime and you've kept it engaging in a way of grab your little one's toy and be like, let's go brush their teeth. Like, let's go be fun, mix it up. Doing 4 boring requests right before to get to a prize of boring bedtime. Nobody wants that. I'm not even excited about the bedtime routine, right? For me, right? So can I bring the toothbrush out and brush my kids' teeth where they're playing? My kids 9 out of 10 times do not brush their teeth in the bathroom. People might find that gross. I'm not sure. They brush it out in the lounge and then they run and spit and then they come back out to their toys, right? We'll have bath a bit earlier in the afternoon. We'll muck around with doing something else. We'll get a toy involved in something. And it sounds like it might be extra work, but it's actually so much easier. And then when there's big boundaries around that, the boundaries are held. So Jamie, we want to be strong with boundaries, but we also want to be kind. But most importantly, we want to set our little ones up to win. And the way that we do that is through connection and through changing the process of the lead up to bedtime to be fun and engaging. So I don't want anyone to come away from this and think, right, I've got to be like drill sergeant. That's it. Like, I hope that you can hear my kindness in my voice and the connectedness that I have within the family of being like, it's not just about a boundary. It's not just about being a dictator and stern and I'm the authoritarian. There's this happy medium that goes like, I'm so gentle and kind and loving. And I said, no. I said, no. And I understand your big feelings around that. And I'm not going to punish you for them. And I'm not going to look at you like they're too much. And I really hope that let's go brush your cow's teeth and take him to bed and do this and that, right? So that's what we want to do. And then let's go do this and let's go outside and have a shower in the sun, when it's summer. Like, I'm a sleep consultant. We don't even have a routine for bedtime. Like, yes, we do all the things. We brush our teeth, we have our dinner, we do all the things, but nothing's like, we're chill. We're like, let's play this. Let's go do this. Let's have rumble tumble time in the front room. Like all of that in the lead up Set your babes up to win because it's fun. It's not just all the boring requests in a row. So it really matters. So I'm going to get to, now I'm going to tell you guys about two things, and then I'm going to get to some questions. I have programs. There's no surprise that I'm going to tell you about those quickly. I'm literally going to take 2 minutes of your time, not even. I have an online program where I support you every day in this group, answering questions in the group every day as you're implementing the video program, so that you get 3 months access to an entire video course, principles, how-tos, everything for teaching this part. Right, for those transitions, for catnapping, frequent waking, anything that you feel stuck in, the online program teaches you all of that. And then you get me in the group every day answering the questions, plus going live as well as that once a week. You'll get a discount sent out over the next, like probably today or tomorrow, right? So if you want to jump onto that, there's the same thing for toddlers, which teaches you toddler lead ups, behaviors, getting away from having to sit with your toddler's bed, getting full night's sleep. Obviously for babies as well. And then we also have one-on-ones. So if you want a one-on-one with myself or one of my team who are Unreal, like pediatric based, like Unreal professionals, we have an initial consult that's either in-home or phone. If you're in WA, it's in-home, Melbourne as well, or phone consult. Then we email a plan, and then we call you every single day except for Sundays for 2 weeks. We are making sure in real time, do this. Yep, that's great. Troubleshoot this, making sure that it's sorted, like your baby's sleeping beautifully and sleep is sorted for you guys. We email a plan, we have those daily calls, and then you get lifetime access to our client portal, right? So if you want to know any more about that, please pop a hello or something in the chat, or you can call me or message me. info@gentlesleep.com.au is the email. So now we're going to get to some questions, and my number is 0404 987 982. So if you're like, Tara, I need to have a chat, I'm done, call me and we'll get it sorted. Okay, so now, okay, so Chloe's got a 21-month-old who's waking too early. So when people say, just hang in there, they'll grow out of it, I want you to remember this, right? You do not have to hang in there. You do not, you do not have to do this, right? Chloe, you do not have to keep going with this pattern of waking, right? I want you to look at this sleep pressure in the lead up to bedtime. I want you to look at how can I teach my babe to be awake and go to sleep. Now, Chloe, if your little one is 21 months old, to be honest, from 2 years onwards, so 2 to 3 years when their nap is becoming dodgy anyway, I think it's the worst time to get rid of a dummy. You either need to do it now. I'm talking now at 21 months, very soon before 2, because at 2 onwards, the nap becomes really tricky. So that's the worst time. Or you need to keep the dummy to well over 3. But I can't guarantee then that your little one is not going to stop all this waking, because I could teach you how to not do the holding to sleep, right? But if your babe is actually still being impacted by waking because of the dummy, even if they can find it themselves, they're still waking and now it's hard. Now you're in a resettle that you wouldn't have been in if they learned to settle without it. So your goal is to teach your little one to be awake and go to sleep from the beginning of the night and then through the naps, right? Obviously, like how long do I do this for? What do I do this for? That's all in the programs. But what I would say, hun, is that I would look at possibly getting rid of the dummy now so that you don't have to worry about it in this 2-year period. Or you can keep it, but then you'd still need to implement a method to do the awake to sleep where you don't have control of the dummy and only she does. But the only thing is that I can't then guarantee that your baby isn't still going to be waking to find the dummy, use the dummy, and now is awake, and then you have to do the settle. So I hope that makes sense. How do you know it's like habit feeds? Because most babes will track and have like a roundabout. Now, a lot of pediatricians will say like 6 months onwards, they don't need feeds. I still like the idea of 1 night feed from 6 months to 12 months if they wake for it. Of course, if you make changes, some of our clients, we plan on keeping 1 feed and their babe starts sleeping through, so we don't have to worry about it, right? It's totally up to you guys, whichever way. But typically what I would say is that I'd look at, what's been happening in that lead up to bedtime and all of that, right? And then when you use the method, when you do those resettles and get to that 1 feed in the second half of the night, or the 2 feed, if you're doing 2 feeds a night because your baby's between 3 to 5 months old, make sure they're a good 4 hours apart. But then I'd see how that goes. So that is what I'd be doing for that one. Now, the other thing is always start from the beginning of the nighttime. Don't go gung-ho. If you're like, I'm going to ditch a dummy, but I don't know then how to manage crying, that's when I'd recommend jumping on, because guys, people come to us and they're like, my baby cried for hours. That should not be the case. Okay. So please make sure that like I was talking about boundaries, but like everything, make sure you have a really effective way to manage it. It makes a really big difference. Okay. So, Emily, for your 9-month-old, I would say that the second half of the night, one feed is great. The other wakings would be more about what they're associating with sleep or getting into, to back to sleep. Of course, guys, also, like I said, don't go, like, definitely look at what the associations are. Chloe, you might hold your babe for a couple of days while doing no dummy, right? And then you go from holding into the cot awake. So you've done a bit of a wean first. Yeah. So see how that goes as well. So yeah. Awesome, guys. I promise to keep this at an hour. I've gone just over, but I hope that you guys have gotten a lot from this. I hope that it makes sense, that you're like, right, these are the areas that I need to focus in on making that change on. Keep an eye out for an email that's coming through. Yeah, I hope you guys, I would just love your feedback. If you have me on Instagram, if you have my email, like, please just feel free to send me a message, say, hey, I found this useful, would like to know this, blah, blah, blah. I'm really open to it. I'm glad you found it helpful, Jamie. So that's awesome. All right, you guys, you know where I am if I need you. If you need me, please don't stay stuck. Please don't. It is transformative. And I promise you that with every part of me that I have only the best intentions for everyone and their babes and, moving forward. So thanks, guys. Biggest love. Bye all.